On this episode of Made in America, I'm with Marty Guay from Stanley Black Decker. We cover some really exciting topics, global trends that are favoring Connecticut, public-private partnerships, and a whole lot more. Definitely going to want to stay tuned. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to the next episode of Made in America. I'm with Marty Guay, VP of Business Development for Stanley Black Decker, and also a lead at the new Manufactory in downtown Hartford. Marty and I met at Chris Murphy's Manufacturing Advisory Council. I think today's going to be super interesting. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about, so let's get going. Marty, thanks so much for coming on today.
Ari, thanks for having me here today.
It's awesome. Hey, listen, I want to kind of get started. I think a lot of people know Stanley Black Decker, but just in case, what does Stanley Black Decker make, and why do they make it?
Stanley Black Decker is one of the great American industrial companies. It's 176 years old, born in New Britain, Connecticut. Frederick Stanley built the business, started in 1843, and started as the Stanley Bolt Manufactory, making bolts and hinges. And really capitalized on the second industrial revolution, learned processes around mass production,
sure,
the second industrial revolution,
yep,
and really built such a great brand. It's an amazing business. Today, the business is a global leader. It's a diversified industrial in many different areas. We have you know us in our power tools and our hand tools with some of the great iconic brands of Craftsman.
Everybody knows the black and yellow.
DeWalt, Craftsman, but we also have an engineered fastening business where we make fasteners to hold together cars, planes, bridges, all different kinds of devices, smartphones. We have a oil and gas business. We have an infrastructure business that takes apart things. We have a global security business to include our automatic door business in Farmington and our Stanley Healthcare business and also our electronic security business. So what Frederick Stanley started in New Britain 176 years ago is now a 60,000 person global organization, and it's really been enabled in the last 20 years. It's about 7 times bigger than it was 20 years ago. So the business is on a great trajectory.
So that's a lot of growth for a company that's been around for as long as it has. Seen significant growth just sort of in the last 20 years. So we're talking about, 170-ish-year-old company that in the last 20 years is just really almost 10% of its existence has really taken off. So what do you think has kind of enabled that growth, or what do you guys see? Is it the diversification that's really enabled that, or what's kind of propelled Stanley forward in the last 20 years?
Well, we think it's really around the execution of the business model.
Yep.
And the business model itself, how we deploy capital, how we invest back into the business, how we invest in acquisitions, and how we drive organic growth. So we are taking market share from our competitors, and we are really on a great path to achieve by 2022 a $22 billion revenue objective.
Wow.
This is what our CEO, Jim Lurie, has enabled in the company,
yep,
is a really strong vision and a purpose. This was a $2 billion company 20 years ago. It's going to be a $22 billion company 22 years later, yeah.
So that's a pretty significant amount of growth. So talk about that vision a little bit. Kind of what is Jim's vision for the future of Stanley, and maybe start to connect that back to Connecticut.
Sure. Well, Jim has really activated the organization in a profound way, and when he came into the CEO role, before he was COO and before that CFO, so Jim's been here since 1999 and one of the architects of the growth journey. But when Jim came into the CEO position, he really focused on three tenets, 3 pillars. The first was top quartile performance. Obviously, our stock price or our share price is a proxy for that.
Yep.
The second is to be known as one of the world's great innovative companies, and not just industrial or manufacturing innovation, but one of the world's great innovation companies. And he's enabled in the last 3 years a really powerful and strong innovation ecosystem inside of the company that's also being connected to the outside world, but a really strong innovation ecosystem's been developed. And the third pillar is around corporate social responsibility. So within that, we've got very strong diversity and inclusion objectives.
Yep.
We have the need. We want to empower 10 million makers in the next 10 years. We want to improve the lives of 500 million people across the globe. We also are going to be carbon positive by 2030. So
meaning that
our carbon footprint of Stanley Black Decker will make the world greener.
Okay.
And then we signed up for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation initiatives around packaging to make our packaging by 2025 recyclable, reusable, or biodegradable. So there's a whole global push around really
making that happen,
cleaning up the world, and Jim has really taken a leadership role in all these areas.
Can we just? I want to go back. This is all great stuff. Let me just dive back to the innovative company, and I think most of our listeners aren't going to be a $22 billion company. Most people aren't, but I think innovation is something that everybody can kind of latch onto. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit, and I don't know what your role is in that actually, Marty, but how does Stanley look to innovate? I know that's a challenge for large companies in general, right? Most people look to small companies. Certainly some large companies buy innovation. Others kind of try and develop it. So just talk about how Stanley's kind of working up that innovation and what lessons people could take from that.
Sure. We have several business units within Stanley. I talked about them earlier. Each one has a core innovation team around it, and that typically looks like an R&D or an engineering department. And those groups really focus on, maybe digital apps, maybe feature set improvements, incremental improvements.
Right. So kind of the next adjacent possible square we can get to with what we have.
Exactly.
Before we move on, just real quickly, how big would an innovation team be for a particular business unit?
Good question. They scale with the size of the business.
Sure.
We've got we spend a certain percent of our R&D budget is all included in this,
right.
But we're known as one of the best leverage innovation companies in the world. Over the last 20 years, there's two companies that have been identified that get the best return on innovation dollar spent.
Right.
It's a PwC study.
Okay.
Apple and Stanley Black Decker.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty strong company, I think, in general.
We think so.
Looking back 20 years, a lot of people would say Apple's done quite a bit to innovate, between the mobile phone, the laptop, the iPad, and all that stuff's been a big leader.
We think so. And they spend about 5% of their revenue on innovation. I think we spend just under 2%. But it's a meaningful amount of money that we spend.
Sure.
But we're really leveraging it in a positive way. So each core business unit has their innovation teams inside. Next to each business unit, there are breakthrough innovation teams. These are located around the world where they'll work on bigger opportunities, bigger challenges, bigger problem sets. They typically look to go after solutions that can generate $100 to $200 million in revenue.
Okay. So the first group is the adjacent, what I call the adjacent possible. It's looking at what we have. How do we do the next step to make it a little bit better, whether it's a manufacturing process and result of one of our products or what have you. And then there's the other kind of leap forward innovation team, which is something totally new or revolutionary.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we have, next to that, we have our Stanley Ventures arms, where we take minority investments in businesses that are really important for us, where we may not have an internal core competency or a technology that we want to get rights around for a certain period of time. So we're investing in several small startups around the world. We also have a open innovation team, which is working with colleges and universities and other corporates that are non-competitive, where we can collaborate on items of mutual interest. And we have a exponential learning organization in Silicon Valley, and they're focusing on really incubating some startups that could be exponential, and they're really off to the side.
That's so kind of like moonshot type of
exactly.
Type of stuff.
But we learn a lot about ourselves and our business when we try these different things, because we flex different muscles. We look at things from different perspectives. And then we have downtown Hartford in our One Constitution Plaza facility, our Manufactory 4.0. And in that facility, we have our Industry 4.0 Center of Excellence, where we're looking to enable technologies, systems, and processes for our 100-plus factories around the world.
Right.
And we also host our Techstars accelerator there, where we bring in startups from around the world.
And is the Techstars related to the Stanley Ventures, right? So Techstars, for those people that don't know, or maybe you want to explain it briefly about kind of what Techstars is and what it's doing.
Techstars is one of the great innovation acceleration organizations in the world. The other one is Y Combinator, but they take startups if they're selected to be in their accelerators, and they take 2 years of development and compress it into 13 weeks through mentor-driven programs, workshops, and really enabling these startups. Last year, we had 10 startups from around the world, 7 from outside the U.S. come to Connecticut. I really focus on additive manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is 3D printing for manufacturing. We know this is going to be a disruptor. We don't know how, when, or where, but
what it's going to do. But we want to be involved.
Absolutely, absolutely, because this is a the world is becoming digitized, and it's changing dramatically. So Techstars is one of those relationships that we really can see what's going on in the world's innovation ecosystem.
Totally.
And we have access to their 45 other accelerators around the world. So their AI accelerator in Montreal, their construction technology accelerator in Amsterdam, their fintech accelerator in London. So we have access to those startups,
right,
and the mentors that are working with them. We really believe that that the world is being disrupted so fast that we really need to compete on our rate of learning and our ability to work within ecosystems. And this gives us really that discipline
to do that. I think what's also interesting about Techstars, and I was involved as a mentor last year, is that it not only does it kind of help Stanley, but I think there's a really interesting combination of reaching out to the community, at least as far as the accelerator in Greater Hartford goes, and giving the opportunity for other people to come in manufacturing, or more like me, supportive of manufacturing, the technology side, to be able to kind of work with these startups and connect with each other and see what's going on. Because there's the Techstars mentors, there's happy hours, there's lunches, there's kind of connections there. Right. So it links that. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and since we're really focused on trying to bring knowledge to the Connecticut base, maybe you could shed some light on your view of kind of how the Manufactory and the Techstars is going to impact Connecticut in the future for Connecticut.
Well, it's a fair point, because we also not only bring in the mentors, we bring in other corporates. So we bring in people from other Connecticut companies or New England companies. We've had mentors come in from Google Ventures, Amazon Ventures. Boeing came in, Ford, Goodyear. They all came to Hartford to see these companies. This year we have 10 more companies. Half are in additive, the other half are in sustainable packaging. Okay.
Well, that kind of dovetails going back to the corporate responsibility.
Exactly.
We're looking to innovate. So you're leveraging that.
And we believe, Ari, that all these are actually they're actually force multipliers with each other. We can't be top quartile performance unless we innovate. We can't. We can't have corporate social responsibility but only produce, good results. We need to do both. We need to attract talent. So all these actually work together. For us, the Manufactory represents an investment in Hartford also. After 175 years in New Britain, we could have located the Manufactory anywhere in the world. But we decided on downtown Hartford because we believe that cities are becoming the battleground for talent, ideas, entrepreneurs, and money, and we have to help enable that. So we're all in to help enable Hartford and Connecticut's success. It's important for the community, which makes it important for us, and that also has knock-on effects, how we can recruit people in and do different things. So we found that we've really gotten a great reception from the city. And I've had the privilege of engaging with a lot of the stakeholders. A lot of them are community organizations within the city, to bring young people in to see this. Because manufacturing is now going high tech. It's not dull, dirty.
So you're looking at workforce development in addition to kind of doing it. I mean, listen, so corporate responsibility is a great reason to put it in Hartford. Were there other reasons? Were there other value impacts outside of the corporate responsibility and the historical legacy of Stanley that made Connecticut or Hartford a good place to say, hey, we want to put an innovation for Industry 4.0. We want to have that here versus, like you said, and literally anywhere in the world.
Right. Well, we believe that Hartford was a world leader in the second industrial revolution.
Absolutely.
So 100 years ago, when Henry Ford was looking at mass production, he came to Connecticut. He visited Colt and he visited Stanley to see how it was done. And this was a leader. You see all the so to say, the bones of that manufacturing as you drive around. But we think we can recreate a advanced manufacturing epicenter back in Hartford for the fourth industrial revolution. And these are high-tech jobs around, industrial IoT, automation, robots,
sure.
cobots, cell automation, all those types of things.
And the manufacturer, I know guys have invited people, not just Stanley people, but other companies to come and see it. So talk a little bit about that. If I'm a small aerospace manufacturer, medical device manufacturer, whatever, making anything else, how can I take advantage of what Stanley's doing in Hartford? How can I participate and be part of the ecosystem?
Sure. Well, we've hosted a lot of different groups. Anywhere from the all the deans of the engineering schools to the Connecticut Technology Council to CCAT's leadership, all the important people in Connecticut, the community organization.
Sure. Had some kids in there too from the Science Center and other places. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we believe everyone needs to be around this. We had the aerospace components manufacturers.
Yep.
Paul Murphy does a terrific job with that group, and I think there's 100+ people in his organization,
yep.
but 300+ suppliers within Aerospace Alley. And we brought them in and showed them around, and they're very much interested in what we're doing. And if we could help others in the journey with what we're doing, we're more than happy to help. We have to organize those times and tours that make sense for our business, because everyone in that building's trying to achieve our targets.
Sure.
We can't help without achieving our targets first.
Right.
But for sure, we're curating.
Participating more of a, so it's like, I just think that's, something I believe in so strongly, right? That together we rise and fall together, right? And,
exactly.
And we need to work together, because a healthy manufacturing ecosystem, to your point, you mentioned Colt and Stanley, of course, Pratt and Whitney started
Absolutely.
here, and tons of others that are in the area, Winchester, Smith & Wesson, those are Connecticut, Pioneer Valley type companies. Those guys all work together. And just like Silicon Valley has all these different startups working together, we need to kind of recreate or breathe new life into that ecosystem and bring people together. It seems like Stanley's trying to take a leadership role in making that happen.
Yeah, Jim Lurie really has set forth the vision to collaborate and work. The Governor Lamont has put him on the CERC board. Yep. So I get the privilege of supporting Jim and his efforts around really bringing strong workforce development strategies to the state of Connecticut,
yep.
While also creating this advanced manufacturing ecosystem in Hartford. And what that looks like is bringing startups here, bringing venture capital here, bringing entrepreneurs of all different kinds,
yep.
creativity people, linking the technical community with the arts community, because there's a lot of innovation around arts, and
sure.
we need to combine those two, and bringing other corporates here. It's important that global companies that are working in advanced manufacturing hang a flag in Hartford. So we're
Do you see that's happening? Is there movement
happen.
In that area?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
talk about that. Marty. You got a lot of energy. You're super positive. Obviously, people think you're doing a great job. Tell me what we got going on.
Well, what we're trying to set forth is to create an advanced manufacturing ecosystem here, where Hartford is really known for its leadership, its thought leadership, and really create a forum for people that are interested in this to come here to learn about it, to invest, to experiment, to innovate. So we're working with all these stakeholders, and I'm working with the Metro Hartford Alliance. Yep. I think David Griggs is great leadership,
tremendous
leadership there, right?
Absolutely. So and a great track record of success everywhere he's gone. Exactly. Buffalo, Twin Cities.
It'll happen. Yep. It's just how far we're going to get. This will happen. I think the mayor has set forth a very clear plan on how he views Hartford, and I think Mayor Bronin has done a great job. We think a lot of the mayor and what he's doing.
Yep.
But we also need to bring along the city.
Yeah.
We can't have an advanced manufacturing ecosystem without the young kids in the challenging schools, and the Boys and Girls Club. Sure. Sabrina's Girls for Technology group. What Anthony Barrett's doing at the Wilson Gray YMCA and on Albany Ave. They need to be part of this.
Absolutely.
We need to bring them along, because it's the human capital that gets enabled that really drives this, and that's really where Hartford is going to is going to thrive, and we're very bullish. I'm very bullish on what's going to happen in Hartford.
So talk about that. I mean, you're not even a Hartford native, right? You're a Boston guy.
Yeah. No.
Let's just. I mean, circling this, we're back to the future here. I mean, talk about kind of how you got sitting here in this chair today. Well, not the arm twisting I did to get you here, literally, but up to that point.
Well, I was working in some of Stanley Black Decker's businesses, running some global businesses, and Jim Lurie had asked me to come run the Techstars accelerator. And in life, there's always the stated task. You need to get this accelerator stood up, and we need to find ways of value. We need to connect it to the community. But the implied task was, let's get something going in Hartford. And I really love an implied task because it's somebody. Jim has a clear North Star, a clear vision,
right?
And it's my job to activate that. And it's a white canvas. Hartford led the world of manufacturing 120 years ago because what we did with our hands was world class. And the whole Pioneer Valley, Springfield down New Haven. They were making Rolls Royces in Springfield.
Yeah, I mean the Pope motor car,
right.
the bicycles, the
Columbia
typewriters.
Bicycle Factory, right? So Hartford led the world with what it could do with its hands. Precision manufacturing, which Pratt & Whitney and a lot of others still do.
Absolutely.
But as those hands became more expensive, those jobs went down to the Mid-Atlantic to the Carolinas.
Yep.
In the 50s, after the war. And then those jobs in the 80s and 90s went to Mexico.
That's right.
And then after 2000, those jobs went to China.
That's right.
Well, now with the advances in the technology and the disruption with advanced manufacturing, it's what people can do with their heads that matters, not their hands. And that's why Connecticut is in such a great position with its workforce, with its talent base, with its economic ability to get people trained up, skilled up. It's community colleges,
experience so many colleges, absolutely.
Right?
And there's something in the water a little bit, right? That history of manufacturing, old tool and die. Like there's just something here that just never really went away. It's just being reborn.
We see it, right? This is who it is. So all the pieces are here.
Yep.
They look a little bit, or they used to look a little bit like islands, and we're pulling them together to look like a continent because we can punch really above our weight class working together. And it's when I talk to people around the world about what we're trying to do here, they're actually extremely interested to get involved because, again, Governor Lamont is supporting the advanced manufacturing cluster. Right. Mayor Bronin, Jim Lurie is driving it. Bob Ledoux at Pratt & Whitney wants this to happen.
Yep.
EB needs that. Right. Sikorsky needs that. So we think this is a real...
There's momentum and real support, public-private partnership. You even brought in, I think, which is not to be... There's, to me, three legs to make this happen, right? Yep. There's the private sector needs to get engaged and involved, and we're talking a lot about that. Yep. The public sector needs to get engaged and involved, and we're talking about that. And the third thing, you touched on it, is kind of education, right? That workforce development, the workforce of today, the workforce of tomorrow, from elementary schools all the way to technical schools and everything in between, really needs to get kind of invigorated and connected back together so that the sum of the parts kind of gets to be greater than the whole. And it's cool that you're doing that. Before we get back to that, because I think there's a lot there, I did want to pull something which I think a lot of our listeners could which is specific to business in general, but like you talked about how sort of Jim has a clear North Star, and then activate somebody like yourself who's got great experience. You've led organizations, you've had a president title, VP title, like you've led some stuff, and kind of activated you. Talk a little bit about how he communicates that North Star and how to activate like a high performer like yourself to execute that vision. Because I think whether you're a $10 million, $5 million, $100 million, $22 billion organization, if you want to move the needle, leaders have to communicate that North Star, find great people, and empower them to make decisions and lead. Yep. So maybe talk somewhat about that, specifically. How does he communicate that North Star, and how did he activate you, Marty, to kind of get the passion and for you to execute at the level you're executing? Well, it's a big question. It's a broad question. I hope I give it justice. Sure.
But Jim is he's been very clear on what his expectations are, and what he wants things to look like. He lets me and others kind of fill in the dots. So I've been fortunate to have colleagues within Stanley Black & Decker who help me, advise me, steer me, coach me, and give me feedback, and also a lot of people outside of Stanley.
Right.
So everybody's important. So I meet all kinds of different people in the city, outside the city, other corporates. I've met, I think I was with 2 university presidents this week, 2 venture capitalists this week. I'll be with a CTO.
These are all people
this
you're
week.
meeting down here in Hartford.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and they're on board with this vision. I think it's a chaotic world. It's changing fast.
So fast.
And the pace of change is actually accelerating. So
Yep.
the learning won't be just in institutions. It'll be, how do we enable lifelong learning programs, and we have strategies around that. But I would say that in a world of change, in a world and we're in a post-global world where things are becoming decentralized. The political institutions that were here are going away. The alliances are changing. Governments can't solve the problems they could. There's too much interconnectivity, right?
Absolutely.
There's too much interdependency.
And the speed. I think it's a lot about the pace, right? The way things move, you got to move fast. And a lot of the old structures weren't built to move fast.
That's exactly right. So they're built more for perpetuity, not for change.
Yep.
So what Jim has done is set forth that vision. And then for us, for me, it's to connect all the stakeholders to align around.
So does he just put a flag out there and say, "Hey, Marty, like this is where I see us 10 years or whatever,
Yes.
20 years down the line."
Yes.
And then it's like make it happen, kind of consistent with the 3 pillars that we talked about.
Yes.
Fill in this. Here's kind of the outlines. You paint the picture. You make sure that it includes our top performance, our innovation, and our corporate responsibility, and make it happen. Is that how that conversation goes?
Yes, and of course he could sit in front of this microphone and be a lot more
Eloquent,
eloquent and detailed. But it is that simple. Visions need to be simple because if they're not, you can't share them.
Sure.
And people can't connect to them. So, we believe that it's important that everyone understands what we're trying to do together. This isn't, so to say, just our plan. It's our plan with a capital O, and we need to get
Bringing
everyone
people
involved,
together.
and people need to come
And that
together.
was a clear part of the vision that was laid out to you.
Yeah.
And how is it done in a way where you're still inspired to do it, right? Like, I mean, given your background and your dynamism, I mean, if someone's trying to puppet master you, I don't think you're long for the position, right? You want to be able to use your brain power and achieve something, and it needs to be in alignment. I don't know if you can kind of pull on that string.
I'll give you an example. Advanced manufacturing, Connecticut leads the country in how much advanced manufacturing workers are paid. We have the highest paid because of what they make. So it's the highest skilled manufacturing workforce overall.
Got it.
But when Jim and I talk and other leaders inside of Stanley Black Decker, if we're going to create an advanced manufacturing epicenter in Hartford, when we do that, we need to solve for aerospace.
Yep.
That's a long pole in the tent.
That is a long pole.
We're not an aerospace manufacturer.
Right.
So, we need to make sure that we have those constituents filled up, because we don't want to create something in Hartford that doesn't bring everybody with it, especially the big players. There's 19,000 jobs that Pratt & Whitney has in Connecticut.
Right.
We need to make sure that this ecosystem's enabled.
Yeah, it's gonna be a problem if we're not addressing those. It's
got to enable them, but it also has to enable everything that Joe Brennan and Eric Brown are doing at CBIA and CMC with the 8 state manufacturing associations they're working with.
Sure.
There's 4,000 manufacturers in the state. They need to benefit from this.
Absolutely.
So it's important that we don't try and solve for 100%, but we need to capture a moment where everybody can benefit from this at some point.
Are you looking for those connecting threads that bring all those organizations together and kind of trying to play on those? Like, how do you bring...
I meet with them and get their input. So all the different stakeholders, I'll meet with superintendents of schools in town that are teaching STEM to, I've been with the CMC and that group. You need to bring everyone along, and we're humble in this journey. There's one value that we keep at Stanley, and Jim drives us, is we need to be humble and bring people along, and we're going to be a leader in this process, but not the leader.
Right.
We need other leaders to step up too, and it's an opportunity for it. But I think having the vision and the goal really activates other people.
So you're out there sharing that mission, sharing that vision, and trying to activate them to get engaged. And do you see that? Do you see them putting concrete efforts or concrete commitments to help what you're trying to do?
Yes. Yes.
You want to share any of those? Is there?
Well, I was with the new president of UConn yesterday in Jim Lurie's office with our senior team, and it was a courtesy visit to acknowledge, Tom Katsalewis coming in and, an important leader in our community.
Absolutely.
And, we need UConn to be a successful engine.
We absolutely do.
What can we do? What can they do? And, in the conversation, it was a long conversation, but I shared this whole advanced manufacturing ecosystem, and Hartford is an epicenter. And, Tom was really engaged in how can we help. He had some ideas around thought leadership and things that they could do. So right away, stepping in, I was with Greg Woodward at University of Hartford on Tuesday. Same kind of conversation. So people are saying, how do we help? What do we need to do?
Right.
And people can help when they can see the future. Jim has just laid out kind of that future.
And then take that step forward. And it sounds like you're hearing that's great on the educational side. What are you saying on the private sector? Are you guys engaged with EB, engaged with
yes.
Northrop Grumman or Sikorsky, engaged with UTC or Pratt & Whitney? And what are they saying? And what's the message you're hearing from those, maybe Barnes Aerospace Command? I don't know if those are,
They are. They are, yeah. Everyone has the same issues and same problems. We need to solve for the skills gap, and workforce development is step one.
Yep.
So that's something
you wouldn't be surprised to hear. I hear that a lot.
Yeah. And the governor is really driving a consolidated and coordinated
effort to improve
around that.
Gap.
Yes, and I think there's more coming on that.
Do you see a lot of crossover? Because you talked about sort of like the 19,000 jobs from UTC directly, not to mention all the tens of thousands of other jobs from the supplier base. Are the skills that, say, the folks need to drive aerospace the same that we need to do what Stanley Black and Decker is doing across its business units, the same for EB, the same for, for the other kind of players?
There are skills that are what I would call very vertical, and they relate to if you're going to be working on, aerospace. There are certain definite skills that are just related to that. They may not be related to what we do, building tape measures in New Britain. But there's also these horizontal skills that are super important. One of them is digital fluency, digital proficiency.
Of course.
I mean, everyone needs that to participate in this society.
Totally. You're not going to get far without that. Yeah.
You're not going to get far without it. So people that are in the healthcare sector, in the life sciences sector, in the insurance sector, advanced manufacturing, they need that competency. So there's a lot of skills that are foundational to everything.
And we can build through that.
And we can build on that. So we should become the best digitally fluent state out there. That's something that could happen and get everyone kind of speaking. That's the new lingua franca of the world, right?
Absolutely.
Is digitization.
You got it.
And then, there are other things. It's not just knowledge-based skills, but there's abilities around problem solving, problem recognition, collaboration. You need to teach people how to do these things.
That's sort of somewhat innovation skills, kind of, right? It's problem-solving skills. And to your point, thinking, I don't know, three-dimensionally is the way I like to think about it, right?
Yeah.
Looking at it.
Spatial thinker.
So, exactly. And kind of saying, here's a problem, how do we solve it? And really getting into that, getting away from, to your point earlier, about sort of where we're good with our hands and we're putting things together. That's got to be part of it. But in the future, a lot of the basic put together is going to be cobots, robots. So it's going to be more about how do we program them to do what they need to do? How do we think about problem solving?
Right.
And you see that as an area that's a cross industry. Yeah.
Everything. Because, I'm very clear when I meet with the college presidents and provosts, we business does not want them to be a training center for our workforce.
Right.
What we actually are looking for is for them to produce very knowledgeable citizens who want to work hard and prosper in Connecticut, but have skills that are acknowledged with megatrends, whether they're around digital, whether they're around new ways to collaborate. There's new ways to collaborate in the world that didn't exist 10 years ago. We need to
5 years ago.
5 years ago, we need to teach people how to do this.
Right.
And lifelong learning and know that people are going to have to learn, unlearn, and relearn things all the time.
And that's where those fundamental skills come in.
Exactly.
If I know how to think and I know how to problem solve, then I can just implement the new thing to solve some problems. Are you guys going deeper than, the universities? Are you engaging any of like sort of high school type educational level where, kind of get that going even before the college
Yeah,
place?
we talk to them. I mean, our workforce is 60,000 people. We believe we have to reskill 30,000 of those people in the next 10 years.
Wow.
So we need to create a learning organization internally. And as we do this and learn how to create lifelong learning programs and enable people how to learn, we actually are sharing these learnings with the state.
With the state so that they can use and implement that.
Absolutely. And we're working with some organizations like the Business Higher Education Forum in Washington to put together collaborations, this whole collaboration between academia and industry, to include the community colleges. And it's also, we may skill people up for the next 5 years, but they're going to have to know something. Who knows what's going to look like?
Something different 10 years from now,
right?
absolutely.
What's it going to look like?
So we'll talk about the workforce a little bit. Stanley, of the 60,000, how many of the Stanley employees are here in Connecticut?
1,500.
And do you see that number changing in the future? Like, what why is that number so low? And part of its kind of factors. Well, let's just talk about that.
Yeah, well,
the position of Stanley in Connecticut.
I think part of what Stanley's success has been is it's been able to grow organically, but also be acquisitive. And
Sure.
when we buy, one of the great companies in the world, Black and Decker, 9 years ago, they're headquartered outside of Baltimore in Towson, Maryland. So we acknowledge that legacy, we nourish that legacy, and we drive it. When we buy an oil and gas business, it's in Houston, and that's really the ecosystem where we want it. And,
Sure.
And So I think a lot of it's an acknowledgement of the business itself. It's not an intentional, we're committed to the state. We're committed to the success of the state. Jim has been very clear that we're going to lean in and give it all we got.
Yep.
We're looking forward to others to do that with us or take their space and do it in their space. We want to coordinate and collaborate. We're not really interested in who gets credit.
Yeah,
we want to go home on Friday afternoon and things are running better than last Friday afternoon. So it's, for us, Connecticut's important, but also Connecticut has to address its challenges, right? There's some fiscal structural issues that the legislature needs to tackle. There are just some big problems that people need to lean into. There's I know there's a lot of fights here around tolls and everything else, and I follow what
You're a Mass Pike guy. You're used to
I
those
follow
tolls.
what goes on in Boston, and they raise the tolls, they raise the price on the MBTA. People complain, but you know what? The cost of doing business in Massachusetts is higher than Connecticut.
Right.
It's higher.
Right.
Why do they have the engine they have? Is because all these other constituents work with
together.
the government
Yep.
and work together and get things done. So we're looking forward to passing them at some point.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, that'd be
That's
fantastic.
what we're looking forward to doing.
So, Stanley, I don't know if this is kind of above what we're going to talk about, but a lot of companies have outsourced more of their manufacturing to suppliers, where it seems like Stanley's kind of leaning in to doing more of its own manufacturing, continuing to do that. Just your thoughts on that, and is that the long-term vector for Stanley, to your understanding, is really continue to develop a core competency in not just designing products and improving products, but making those products?
Right. Well, we think we're ahead of the curve in a lot of places, but about 5 years ago, we embarked on a strategy of make where we sell and source where we make. And really what that means is that the supply chain should cluster around the customer base.
Got it.
So we opened up a factory in the UK. I don't know when the last time a factory in the UK was opened up, but a few years ago. And people in the UK want to buy a DeWalt drill that says made in the UK with a
Sure.
Union Jack on the box.
Right.
We've opened about 5 plants in the U.S. in the last 5 years. So what we're seeing is
So more kind of micro manufacturing. So my customer's here, let's put a factory nearby and source near there as well.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, also you're seeing great political pressure on the global order, and the global order is becoming decentralized.
Yep.
So people are moving out of China because there's all kinds of unknowns. When they joined the WTO 20 years ago, people thought that capitalism and the political system would collide.
Yeah.
They're actually been an example where they can take a political system and decouple it from an economic system.
Yep.
So you've got really this.
And you think that's put some pressure on not sourcing in China? Is
I
that
do.
part of the reshore?
It's unfriendly. The reshoring will happen due to the supply chains will move due to political considerations.
Right.
But the reshoring will happen in advanced manufacturing because the workforce of the United States is nimble enough to relearn, will work with their heads instead of their hands,
Right.
and it'll lift the whole economy because these are high-tech jobs. They're not dull, dirty, and dangerous anymore.
And what do you see? How do you see that impacting Connecticut, that reshoring and the move to the head away from the hands?
Well, Connecticut's in a perfect place because of its legacy, because of its workforce, and its proven ability to manufacture complex things.
Right.
I make submarines and airplanes,
Helicopters,
and
airplanes, engines,
Blackhawks, Nighthawks. I mean, this is actually some of the most complicated stuff in the world, some of the most important stuff in the world, and it's done right here. So, I mean, if there's something harder than that,
right,
let me know. But the fuel cell technology. I was with Dr. Radenka Merrick at UConn, and she was talking about the fuel technology to go to the moon was built here in Connecticut.
Absolutely.
So there's
space suits are big.
Hamilton Sunstream.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things that are here. So it makes a complete amount of sense to do things here.
And what's Stanley's role in that part, in kind of that Connecticut revamping? Do you see? Well,
Jim's got a leadership role with CERC and a very visible leader in the business community.
Absolutely.
Sets a tone, sets a standard, sets a commitment. And then we're working behind him to help enable connecting people, activating vision and being a strong member of the community and showing people how it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we've got great companies here, great universities, but, some people have a little bit of change fatigue or non-change fatigue
right.
or, things haven't changed. But, I always tell people you live in the world that's been created or you go create the world you want to live in.
Absolutely.
And the world we want to live in is a very vibrant, strong Connecticut. It's a state with incredible assets.
Yep.
And I see this as a huge opportunity for the state to get competitive again, which it was 20 years, wasn't that long ago.
That wasn't that long ago. Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah. And I think we're going through some of those changes, right? There's a period of kind of like renewal that you have to go through, right?
Sure.
So when you were so successful for so long and you kind of, maybe we missed a little bit that third industrial revolution. We weren't the digital area. We were the hands, the tools, the manufacturing. It's going to take some time to get through that. And there's a lot of investment that needs to come with it, right? A lot of factories were built on the rivers because we needed to have the water power. We're well past that, right? So there's an amount of time to kind of work through that. So I think that's really interesting, and I love the fact that Stanley's super engaged and you're super engaged. I want to talk a little bit about the corporate responsibility because it's funny. I start to talk to a lot of business owners. I've done that for a long time, and now that we're doing the podcast, there's a lot of it on there. And there's some themes you see with a lot of folks that the successful people do certain things, and this corporate responsibility, this engaging in the community, whether it's specific green initiatives, getting involved in boards, and just engaging the community, seems to be like a common thread I'm seeing with organizations that are successful and growing, and Stanley's sort of no different. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Like, what is the linkage? Why is there such a linkage between successful companies and the corporate responsibility? Is there a linkage? Do you think it's just a random, or do you think there is some linkage there?
We believe that people want to work for organizations that have a purpose.
Yep.
And this generation has when we were growing up, everyone was shooting for the stars and wanted to be an astronaut. But everyone now is really wanting to take care of, Mother Earth and the society. And people want to be part of something bigger.
Yep.
A while ago, work was really decoupled from life, and now work becomes part of someone's identity, part of their personal mission, and they want to activate their purpose. Our purpose, why we exist, is we are for those who make the world, because we make things that build the world.
Yep.
So we're for the makers in the world, and I think that draws people to come work for us, that we have a purpose. So corporate social responsibility has a multiple of opportunities to define this purpose, and it activates the existing workforce, but also draws talent to you because people, they want to be part of something bigger.
More than just like a money machine. They want to know they've got some value in there. And you think that's a big draw for, what are we at, Gen Z or whatever we go to?
I know it is. I mean, I see it inside the company. We did a couple years ago, we activated Workplace inside the company. It's Facebook for Work.
Okay.
So we've got the whole company on. There's different groups. There's different business units. We do all of our communications through it. And it's amazing what people are working on and what they're doing and what's important for them. You see that when people share. I mean, sharing is all about identity management, right?
Sure.
It's all about who are you and what do you do, and
It's called what's called workforce.
Workplace.
Workplace.
Yeah, workplace.
And just talk. I mean, what's on there? Is it mostly just like business stuff? Is it more of a community? Like, what? How do you engage?
There's all different kinds of things. There's we get corporate news on there. We get by division. You'll have different things going on. There's innovation groups on there. There's wellness and health and wellness groups.
Yep.
There's diversity groups, where there's Women's Network group or LGBTQ. There's
So really an opportunity to build a community across what's an
Yes.
otherwise really large organization. And this might be a question you don't know how to answer, but I'll throw it at you. If you're a smaller organization, maybe you're not going to use that same type of app. What thoughts would you have about how a smaller organization would kind of activate that culture internally? Because I think, I'll just quickly on this, I think one of the problems is people tend to think, oh, well, we're just 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, 300 people. We're in one or two facilities. Like, the family environment or whatever is just going to happen
Right.
through pure serendipity. Obviously at Stanley, you've had to be more intentional about making it happen because of the structure of the organization. But how could smaller companies, in your mind, from your experience, kind of be able to make sure they are activating that? Because I think unintentionally saying it's just going to happen on its own probably isn't going to ensure that it is going to happen.
right. Well, I think you have to ask people.
Yep.
I think the wisdom is always in the room somewhere, and you have to ask people what they want, what they need, how they're feeling. Not in a problem. Don't give feedback when things are going right, but in those times where people feel safe and secure and want to share. Culture is built with it's people, right? It's all about people.
Yep.
So whether you communicate electronically or you go eyeball to eyeball, it's super important to get people engaged together, because I believe in teams and companies and cities. There's a lot of potential that's unrealized because people don't work together as well as they can. But you see it on teams and in companies where they do.
Right.
Average people win. Average people win championships. Not
Sure. Well,
not
you're
the-
a Boston guy, so
That's
we're
right.
getting into the whole Bill
Not
Belichick.
not a team
do
of
your
all
job.
stars, right?
That's right.
Not a team of all stars. But when you don't, individuals get credit, but teams win or lose. And
Absolutely.
if you're worried about getting credit, you know what? This is a team sport. Life's a team game.
Right.
You need to be on a team to win. This is not.
Yeah, you're not going to make it on your own. How are you building that team for the manufacturing in Hartford? What's the population look like of who's working down here from Stanley? How are you guys building that team here?
Well, the leadership downtown is our VP of Industry 4.0, Sudhi Bangalore.
Yep.
So Sudhi's involved with that whole internal activation, but also a thought leader in the whole area. And if you haven't met Sudhi, I'll introduce you. He's really well spoken on the whole Industry 4.0 and what the world's going to look like. So
Yep.
he's a great voice and colleague to have in the business. Then our Chief Technology Officer, Mark Maybury, has an office downtown
Sure.
too. And Mark used to be the Chief Scientist of the U.S. Air Force. He sits on the Defense Science Board. He's super smart, super engaged, but feet are on the floor. And
Sure. Yeah.
he's able to.
I've been around the manufacturer with him. He's super engaged.
Yeah.
And, he likes watching those little robots walk around and kind of talking about the different 4 areas got going on. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
So,
Yep.
so that's fun. But for me, I try and find all the stakeholders in the city who could be part of this journey, and I keep a roster of about 75 people.
And are you more focused on engaging in the community and building those alliances and driving that mission forward? Is that kind of where Marty's focus is?
That's where my focus
is growing that.
Trying to create value in the city and the state, trying to create that around Stanley Black Decker's legacy, Hartford's legacy, the advanced manufacturing future. But engaging all the stakeholders, for all the and the people that don't seem important actually are important. Everyone's important.
Right. So how can companies get involved? If they are interested, the people listening here may have those smaller manufacturers, maybe want to get engaged, whether it is to actually come see the manufactory and see what's going on, but also maybe just to be part of that. Listen, one of my major goals here, right, is, I just believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and it's sort of that community that you've been talking about. We need to work on all working together and to build this community and create that activated ecosystem that's going to make people just want to be here, like as was before and has been done in other places, whether it's Silicon Valley or whatever it is. So, how can people get involved, Marty, and get engaged?
I would say, at the risk of not knowing who's listening, I would say if you're a manufacturer in Connecticut, go through your manufacturing association. So if it's the New Haven Manufacturers
Association, sure,
with Jamie,
Eastern Advanced Manufacturing,
exactly,
Connecticut Tool, yep.
And those people know me. If it's
So have you been engaged with all those groups, NHMA and EMA?
I've had them
CTMA?
I've had them over to our site, and then I've been involved with Eric Brown's invited me to the meetings, and I'm going. There's another meeting at the end of October I'll be at. So we'll probably curate something through the organizations where they can come and visit and learn.
I'm trying to engage
because people want to. I mean, they're going to have the same challenges. The supply chain will have the same challenges the big guys will.
Absolutely.
And when I was meeting with Electric Boat, we were talking about this notion of solving for workforce. It's not good enough that they have the state help them solve for their workforce. The supply chain needs
absolutely.
They need to get solved for also. So everyone needs to benefit from this.
And so I think through the organizations, try and get coalesce that group together through the different manufacturing associations and alliances and try and move that ball forward.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, number one, I'm going to put my name in the hat of people that think you should get a place down here. I know Jim's on you. I know Luke's on you. So, I'll throw my hat in the ring on that.
It's exciting. This has everything, all the ingredients. I think we just need to sequence it right, put it on the stove, and turn the heat on.
Yeah, and then we're going to...
Because the ingredients are all here.
Just boil it up.
Yep. Yeah. I don't think I don't think people realize that everything is here. It's just we need to get a purpose in that North Star and say this is what we're all doing, and then people will naturally figure out where they fit into it.
How will you know, or how will we know, or when we've achieved some level of success? I mean, I guess we've already. I mean, listen, there's some level of success, right? I mean, I know that there's a couple companies that have moved here after the last Techstars that are kind of growing. We've got another cohort here. Obviously, people are coming to the manufactory, so success has already begun, right? We're not nothing has been accomplished, but like when will you feel like we've really made an impact? Or
so I haven't. We haven't released our public plan yet, so to say, but it'll look like having venture capitalists come to Hartford and meet.
Yep.
It'll look like thought leadership around this. It'll look like corporates committing to move here and flying a flag.
Yep.
Multiple of them around this.
Yep.
So I've kind of force functioned a 2 to 3 year plan.
Okay.
And I'm working backwards.
Okay.
So it'll have all these things because I think you have to force function an outcome.
Yep.
And work backwards. If
Absolutely.
It's an open thing, we're a lot more forgiving with our time and our outcome and say we did something.
Right.
We
need that flag. We need to have I don't know if destination is the right way to say it.
It's an outcome, and it's not the final outcome.
Right.
But it's long enough out to have oxygen to be able to do it.
Yep.
But it's short enough out to be working every day on it.
So let's talk about. So it's going to go off the path of manufacturing a little bit, but something I'm passionate about and want to get your take on it. I think one of the challenges that I've seen, kind of having grown up here, left for a little bit and come back, is not only do the companies, the private sector needs to kind of work together to rise all the boats, but the towns and the town governments need to work together, right? I don't see how we're successful when West Hartford's competing with East Hartford and Glastonbury's competing with Avon, and everyone thinks Hartford should kind of figure it out on their own. If we're going to compete globally, we have to think globally and we have to work together. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? And how are you seeing anything in that area? Is that something on your radar?
It is. And I've met with, I've spoken to all the mayors in the Metro Hartford area and others around the state. I think there's not enough perceived opportunity on the table. So when there is something, people get territorial. We need to put so many things on that they're going to have to prioritize and say, I'll get involved in this, and all these other people get, you know what I mean? So I think we have to load up the moment, so to say, and really get people inspired that there's a ton of stuff that they can activate around and do and work together, but they just don't have the bandwidth to do it all. And
so you think it's a perceived dearth of opportunity that makes people sort of grab onto whatever's there. So if we have more, then it just feels like, hey, my table's full, let's share, versus like I only have this one meal, I got to eat it all myself.
Exactly right. People are a bit territorial, but I think that's somewhat of a learned behavior. And I was talking to a colleague of mine about this early this morning. I mean, we're creating a lot of trust because we're not going to benefit directly. Stanley
Right.
Black & Decker will absolutely benefit indirectly from this, like everyone else.
Right.
But it's a great place to live, work, and play. We want to showcase that. We want to improve the gaps that we have.
Yep.
But then create the future. This isn't just plugging the gaps. This is leapfrogging.
Leapfrogging, I totally agree.
And so we need to work with everybody. And you get all kinds of people. It's like a family, right?
Yeah.
You get all kinds of people, but you got to bring them along.
What's the private sector's kind of role in that, right? So a lot of people lament, well, the town governments could do this, the state government could do that, but we're a land of ingenuity, right? Yankee ingenuity.
Right.
Roll up our sleeves and get shit done, frankly. So what's the private sector's role to kind of get that stuff done and be a purveyor and a focuser on the positive, right? Because let's start with that.
What we believe is that the private sector is actually going to be it has a very strong leadership position around all this because government institutions aren't set up for speed.
Yep.
And they're not set up for change. They're actually built for perpetuity, right?
Going back to that.
So you've got a problem here. And when you can have your opinion on this issue or not, but when the U.S. government pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord, the private sector stepped in and said, we're going to continue to do this.
Yeah.
And we're doing it anyways because we believe in it.
Right.
Same thing around, inclusion, diversity, inclusion. The private sector is really stepping up into
Absolutely.
this and driving it. So we think that the public-private partnership is the only way to solve it because of these interdependencies.
Yep.
And traditional institutions were not set up for this world.
Right. So the private sector needs to be out there, kind of, shoulder to the stone, like making it happen.
Shoulder. And everyone's going to be frustrated with government, but we need government.
Right.
This is important. It brings order. It enables. It does things that nobody else can do.
Sure.
We just need to make sure that centipede or caterpillar, all the legs are moving at the same time on one side.
Right.
It's coordinated. We just need to coordinate activity.
What's the right mix in your mind, kind of doubling down on this kind of question, what's the mix in your mind between acknowledging the challenges that we have, but also focusing much more so in accentuating the positives? Because you talked about something when it comes to culture, right, inside of an organization, which is if you're inside the culture of an organization and all you do is tell people when something goes wrong to try and correct it, most of the time my experience is the things that are going wrong are far fewer in number by a huge ratio to what's going right. But it's easy to focus on what's wrong, which tends to demotivate and not ultimately raise things up. And so I sort of wonder about, do we spend too much time focusing only on our challenges and not enough on the successes? And you're a super positive guy, talking mostly about the future, the options, the opportunities.
There's a lot of writings around this now. The Hartford Business Review Harvard Business Review just did a cover on this about getting feedback and how to give people feedback on their performance and problems, and does it even work?
Yeah.
I believe that people or organizations do things well. You want them to do more of it.
Yeah, that's right.
And you want to protect them from what they don't do well. Not all of us can do everything well.
That's right.
That includes, organizations, institutions, cities, colleges.
Yep.
We're not going to turn a community college into Yale.
That's right.
But we can leverage what they're doing and really scale it up.
They fill different needs, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So a lot of times people want to look at what they're not doing well instead of if we did everything here, what we do well twice as well. Right?
Better.
It's a whole different world.
If you're yelling at your CFO as to why he's not a good IT director or CIO, you're screaming in the wind, right? So it's not really helping you. So how does that translate, and how can the private sector and the business community? I think Jim's done a pretty good job at this. You're doing a great job at what can people do more to say, listen, we understand that Connecticut's got challenges, right? Every state, every location has its own challenges. What can we do to focus more on talking about the positives and focusing on those, to your point, to double, triple, quadruple what we do well, as opposed to trying to lament what we're not?
Right. Well, it comes down to just what you speak about and how you speak about it. I was talking to a while back with Jim Lurie's wife, Rebecca, and she was talking about, all the positives in Connecticut, and people just need to, speak positively, because it is really super important that, what you say really echoes into the future.
Absolutely.
And what you think, right?
Yep.
And I think people, are telling me, well, we don't have this. Okay, you know what? Terrific. But we're not trying to rebuild Damascus here.
That's right.
We're enabling one of the great, parts of the world to capitalize on some mega trends, and we got a lot of smart people. We got a lot of resources. We may have a resource allocation problem, may not be in the right places.
Yep.
We need to solve some structural problems in our cities, but I mean, the only people that are going to leverage that and do something with it are the people here. There's not. We're going to fly in a bunch of people from California to help us, right? We don't need that.
No, we do not need that.
We've already done this. This is like it's a redo. It's a next gen thing. So that's why I'm so damn optimistic, because it's
because it's evolutionary, not revolutionary, right? Like to your point, the revolution, turning Hartford into Damascus, for whatever that means. That would be that's ridiculous, right? So challenging. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about reinventing the wheel here. We're just talking about re-exposing, evolving what we've always been and have been for hundreds of years. The next generation, which is so possible, so much more possible than revolution. I think.
Absolutely. And the organizations that are involved and are engaged either want to lead or will follow. So we're finding great receptivity around this. I think the Governor Lamont's done a real nice job beating a positive drum, and you need that. And it's not an easy job.
No.
I mean, I give that man a lot of credit in what David Lehman's come in and done around DCD and the whole team that they're organizing. It takes time.
Yep.
It takes time, and people are pretty unforgiving, and everyone's got a sarcastic comment.
Everyone thinks they could do it better, right?
Yeah, but people need to be positive, and what they're either part of the solution or part of the problem, right?
That's right. Those are literally the only two choices,
right?
I agree with that 100.
People say to me, "We don't have this." They say, "What are you going to do about it?"
That's right.
What I'm doing about it is what Stanley Black Decker is doing about it. What are you doing about it?
That's right.
Because it's again, people have the ability to change the world. This is our world. Connecticut is the world.
That's right. That's right. And listen, I think the macro trends is really the most important thing that you've laid out there, right? Because you can't fight the ocean, you can't fight the tide, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to ride the tide. We're trying to take this manufacturing 4.0, which isn't maybe going to happen, possibly going to happen. It's happened or happening,
right?
And I mean, just to quickly touch on that, the stuff that you guys are doing in Hartford, the manufacturing 4.0, and the robotics and the cobots and all that stuff, that's not pipe dream. I think last I checked, you guys had 25 factories that were already kind of really had to a large extent
started the journey, right?
Yeah.
In the journey, and some are well down the journey, right?
Right. So, I mean, that's, I think, really an important thing to realize is that we're capturing what's already happening, this trend, and it's playing to our strengths. We need to focus on those and play into it, and not try and fight against it or worry about that, we don't have the same things that other places have, because we're not trying to be those other places.
No, and at Stanley Black Decker, we're going to be known as one of the world's great advanced manufacturers. We will. That'll happen.
Right.
Hartford will be the enabler of that, our Manufactory 4.0.
Yep.
But we also want the city and the state to be that also.
That's right.
And that's where we got to just bring everyone else under the tent.
That's awesome, Marty. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your perspective, talking about the Manufactory and kind of going through all that. I'm really happy to be a small part of that, and you've got my support, and keep supporting you guys and doing what I can to get the word out. Before we kind of wrap up, I wanted to just kind of get through our rapid fire round of questions. So you ready for some hot takes?
I will.
All right, some fun. Here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
There we go. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Neither.
Where's your coffee?
I go the mobile station or the Texaco station. I'm old school.
Old school guy. There we go. You a staycation guy or exotic destination?
Staycation.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Sedan.
I got to add that in there. Everyone, no one's going for either of my options. If you could do anything else professionally besides what you're doing right now, what would it be?
Is exactly what I'd be doing.
All right. What's your favorite business book of all time?
My favorite business book, The Reckoning by David Halberstam.
Wow, that's one I don't know about. The Reckoning. What's one thing you learned early in your career, early in your life, that you think has propelled you to the great successes that you've been able to have in your career?
I had a mentor in a first company I worked for, and he was a top Harvard Business School professor, Jim Heskett. And he coached me on a lot of things, but one of the things that always stuck with me, he said, Marty, hire for behavior, train for skill. Hire people that want to show up on time, that are honest, that work hard, can be on a team, take criticism, do the right thing when no one's looking, and skill them up on whatever you want them to do. Most people hire for skill and fire for behavior.
Right.
You need to hire for behavior, train for skill.
Wow, that's awesome. And then what's one thing you learned later in your career or later in your life that you look back and go, man, if I had known that when I started, it really would have propelled me? What's a later learned lesson?
I would say that there's no such thing as indispensable people. You know, my father told me young, I didn't understand it. He said cemeteries are filled with indispensable people. But I didn't know it till later that the world can go on, survive, and thrive without us. We need to enable this place for other people to be successful. That's our job. Not to control it, but to enable it.
Wow, that's awesome. Listen, well, we think we talked about this a little bit, but if people wanted to connect with you, Marty, or learn more about the Manufactory, what's the best way for them to do that?
Send me an email.
Okay. We'll put the email in the notes, but what is it? What's your email?
Martin.Guay, Guay, at sbdinc.com.
All right. That'll be in the show notes, but you can email Marty and get connected. And I really hope that our community takes advantage of that.
Perfect.
Because we need to get all the manufacturers and the people that care about manufacturing in Connecticut activated to be working together towards that greater good, focusing on the great assets that we have here and building them up. So we'll end on our last question, which is, given a lot that we've talked about today, and we've been around the block for sure, what's something that you think is a key takeaway, the good lesson learned, that if someone's kind of getting the end here and thinking, man, I want this one thing I'm gonna focus on and take away, what would that be, do you think?
Well, I think people have the power to create things and to enable the world. I mean, it's what you're doing with this podcast and beyond. It's what we're trying to do in Hartford. I mean, step into it, go do stuff, right? I think that's the important lesson. People can make the change if they really want it.
That's awesome. And, normally I pick a different thing for people to take away, but I'm so passionate about what you just said that's going to be my same thing. I think, the most important thing is to take action. And we are the change that we seek. We just need to get up off our butts and actually get something done. It's awesome to have you as a partner in getting that done. It's been an inspiration to work with you, to see what's going on. I was at the Manufactory when it was like studs, and to go get a tour and see what you guys and Methuselah and everyone's doing over there has just been super inspiring and fantastic. So thank you so much for being my guest today, Marty, and
Thanks,
I'll
Ari.
keep working with you down the road.
Look forward to it.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe, but what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.